Hey everybody, this is Mike with Free Roaming Hiker, and in this video I am telling you everything you need to know about Cascade Canyon and hiking both the canyon and its two forks, the North and the South Fork of Cascade Canyon. Now I've hiked these canyons and miles of them year after year, so I've built up plenty of knowledge that I'm going to share with you in this video. This includes both forks, the North and the South Fork of Cascade Canyon, as well as plenty of good photo ops and campsites and what else you can access from each canyon. Now, to access these canyons, most people start at Jenny Lake. And that's the lake that was created from the glacier that came out of Cascade Canyon. At the mouth of Cascade Canyon is Grand Teton National Park's most popular hike, Inspiration Point. While nearly everyone hikes Inspiration Point that visits Grand Teton National Park, far fewer actually continue up the canyon. And there's really two ways to get up into Cascade Canyon. One is up the main Inspiration Point trail. The other is up a nearby horse trail that hikers also use to bypass Inspiration Point. However, if it's your first time in the area, I would definitely recommend doing Inspiration Point. Regardless, the horse trail connects just shy of half a mile up from Inspiration Point, and the main Cascade Canyon trail is very easy going. It's not a steep trail, but it gives you plenty of reward regardless. And it really doesn't get steep until you get to about the back end of the canyon, which is about 3 miles in from Inspiration Point. But in between is just unending mountain beauty. The only real interruptions are the peaceful forest groves with lots of old evergreens like pine and spruce and things like that. Mount Owen and the Grand Teton rise thousands of feet on the left side with waterfalls just pouring over the cliffs. And over on the other side, on the right, is the Rock of Ages and its surrounding peaks as you head farther back into the canyon. The potential wildlife you'll see are pika, marmots, black bear, foxes, and moose. I personally haven't seen much outside of that, but that doesn't mean you won't. There's a lot of animals in the area, and you could very well see something else besides those. Now, your best photo ops through Cascade Canyon are going to come pretty much throughout the canyon. Most of them will be facing Mount Owen and or the Grand Teton. And it could be when the trail runs along the creek, it could be the waterfalls crashing high above, or it could even be the forest groves. Really, the best part about Cascade Canyon is that there's just no end to the amount of photo ops that you'll encounter. In terms of camping, there are no actual campsites in Cascade Canyon. If you did want to camp in the backcountry in this area, your best bets are the North Fork or the South Fork. As you approach the back of Cascade Canyon, you'll start reaching the fork for both the North and the South Forks as well. It's tucked away in a forest, and so while it's not as picturesque as what you just hiked through, it is good for a break if you want to catch a snack or get your bearings. Now, just up the South Fork, less than a tenth of a mile, is a very large waterfall, and it cuts through a really steep chasm of rock. So for that reason, we'll start looking up the South Fork. Now, many people will hike the South Fork from the Teton Crest Trail, and as such, they'll start from the top and head down to the forks of Cascade Canyon. However, for this video, we're going to look at it going up. So the South Fork Trail itself is about 5 miles long. From the waterfall that we just mentioned, the trail switchbacks up through the forest, and at about a mile in, you'll reach the South Fork camping zone after a couple of really pretty creek crossings. The camping zone goes all the way nearly to the top of the canyon, and each campsite is marked with a small sign a couple of feet off the ground. And this will be the same for the North Fork as well. If you are planning on taking advantage of the campsites, you must have a permit from Grand Teton National Park. In order to get one, you'll have to inquire with the visitor center on your way in, and they can set you up with one. Otherwise, you can plan in advance and order online months ahead of time. And really, in terms of the campsites, there's not really any bad ones. Where in the canyon you camp just depends on your own goals. If you're coming down the Teton Crest Trail or you just wanted to get a taste of the South Fork, definitely one of the lower campsites will be perfectly good. Or if you have it in you, you can even head up somewhere mid-canyon. Throughout the next few miles, the forest remains consistent until you reach the top, but meadows and wetlands will break up the trees along the way, and that provides for some stunning views of the surrounding peaks. As you approach the top, there's 4 final campsites near the top of the canyon as you start reaching tree line. Interestingly enough, it's in this area that the Avalanche Divide Trail breaks off. This is the only maintained trail that forks off from any of the 3 Cascade Canyon trails. This trail will snake up higher in elevation between the three Tetons and a major landmark called the Wall, which is really just a massive granite rock wall that rises up above the surrounding landscape. The Avalanche Divide Trail winds up to the divide between the South Fork of Cascade Canyon and Avalanche Canyon. Visible below from the divide are Snowdrift and Kit Lakes. The great thing about this trail is it's only about 1.6 miles one way, but it can be strenuous, so definitely know your limits if you want to try it. Regardless, it is well worth the detour if you have enough time and food. Continuing up, as you start leaving the camping zone, the landscape becomes much more alpine. The trees shrink and they fade away, and the trail winds up carving through some rocky crevices and switchbacks up to Hurricane Pass at roughly 10,338 feet above sea level. Hurricane Pass also marks the boundary with Grand Teton National Park and the Jedediah Smith Wilderness. And if you wanted to camp up in this area, the wilderness area is completely free to camp in. So really the only determining factor is the weather. It is a spectacular place to camp, but if there's any chance of thunderstorms overnight, you will definitely not want to be up there. From that area, though, you have majestic views of the three Tetons, the Middle, the South, and the Grand. And there's just nothing but alpine tundra and rock. And farther off in the distance to the north, you can see Mount Moran rising up above the northern Tetons. This, of course, makes for a spectacular spot for photo ops. And really, your best ones through the canyon are going to be anything featuring the Grand Teton. From the lower elevations, the Grand Teton will look a little different, but it is still beautiful, especially if you catch that waterfall crashing down below it. The South Fork of Cascade Canyon itself also has tons of waterfalls, so really anything with waterfalls makes for a great subject. And there's no shortage of inspiration higher up in the canyon as the waterfalls increase. As mentioned, the meadows and the wetlands on your way up also provide great landscape opportunities since they break up the forest and show off the mountains. And likewise, with the Great Creek crossings, especially in the lower elevations of the South Fork, you get some really great intimate forest scenes that also play a great role for photo ops. This could be the foliage itself or the creek rushing through. In terms of accessing other areas from the South Fork, from Hurricane Pass, you'll drop down into the Alaska Basin, and this is all part of the Teton Crest Trail. Most hike it coming from the Alaska Basin and into the South Fork, so essentially heading north. But if you did want to venture farther, the Alaska Basin provides access to Death Canyon via the east and the south, and then also Teton Canyon to the west, which drops down toward Idaho. The wildlife you'll see is similar to Cascade Canyon, though the only difference is I really don't seem to see as many moose up there as in the Cascade Canyon. And so with that, we can move on to the North Fork. And like the South Fork, it's also roughly about 5 miles, though it's about 3 miles to Lake Solitude, which is a popular day hiking destination. And similar to the South Fork, it also sees a lot of Teton Crest hikers since the trail follows those two canyons down and then back up. So from the fork, the trail continues through the trees and it crosses the North Fork of Cascade Creek, which, if you need it, is a great place for water. After about a mile or so, it will emerge from the trees and you get this great wide and distinct U-shaped canyon left over from the glacial carving. This will only widen as you climb higher, and as you do so, it also starts to get a little bit steeper. It'll cross the creek again, and that's when you enter the North Fork of Cascade Canyon camping zone. And again, for this, you'll also need a permit. The camping zone continues to extend up and ends just short of Lake Solitude at the back of the canyon. The trail will pass through boulder fields and small forest groves, and it continues to make a large bend to the back of the canyon. And North Fork especially, there's no bad campsites. Again, it just depends on your ultimate destination and your resources. Your best views are going to be looking back toward the Cathedral Group, which is comprised of the Grand Teton, Mount Owen, and Tiwanaut. And as you start to near the back of the canyon, that's when you'll see the sign that you're leaving the camping zone. At this point, the trail climbs a little bit steeper to get to Lake Solitude, just a half mile farther. And there's a good reason this is a primary day hiking destination. It's a stunning glacial lake right at tree line and situated below the Cathedral Group off in the distance. And it just makes for an iconic scene from the Teton Mountain backcountry. Now, Teton Crest Trail hikers and other backpackers will continue past the lake to begin ascending up the east side of the canyon. The trail gets steep here and it climbs relentlessly up the canyon wall through a lot of loose rocks and granite. Regardless, there are jaw-dropping views of both the North and the South Fork Canyon as well as the cathedral group the higher up you get. Near the top, it'll make a few switchbacks, and that's when it climbs up to the Paintbrush Divide at roughly 10,720 feet above sea level. From here, you get just incredible views of surrounding mountains and canyons. And on the other side of the divide is Paintbrush Canyon. And really, from the North Fork of Cascade Canyon, that's the only other place you can get to. If you were to continue, you would make a scenic loop that's around 20 miles or so that connects both Cascade and Paintbrush Canyon. If you did want to try this loop, though, admittedly, it is a little bit better going the other way. A lot of people find that going up Paintbrush Canyon is a little easier on your knees and coming down the North Fork rather than vice versa. And in addition, the last few miles of Paintbrush Canyon are mostly in a forest, whereas the last few miles of Cascade Canyon are below the Grand Teton and all the scenery that makes it so spectacular. The wildlife in the North Fork of Cascade Canyon is similar to the other two canyons. And in terms of photo ops, there's no shortage of great scenes of the cathedral group rising high above the canyon from the trail. So really anywhere you see the cathedral group rising above the trail will make a beautiful photo. Lake Solitude itself is also a major destination, so that's a great photo op. If you can find a way around the lake and that way put more of the lake in front below the Tetons, that makes for a spectacular photo. And then really those boulder fields make for great scenes, as well as any large patches of wildflowers you come across. And so that's pretty much everything you need to know about the Cascade Canyon and its forks. Note that the miles can add up, so if you are day hiking, consider taking the shuttle across Jenny Lake. That'll knock out about 2.5 miles in each direction. And the only thing you really want to make sure of is that you're back for that last shuttle if that is your plan. Otherwise, you will have to hike out those last 2.5 miles. So if you have any questions about anything, or if I missed something that you're curious about, definitely feel free to drop a question down in the comments below, and look for links in the description to some relevant blog posts on freeroaminghiker.com. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching and happy trails.